Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS College Football Week 12. We're on to Saturday, same as the last few weeks. I'm going to get through as many games as I can. Whatever I don't get to, we'll go through on the live show. 10 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be live for 2 straight hours from 10 a.m. Eastern time up to kickoff. If you're able to make it, would love to see you in the comments. Week 12, let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
First up, we got Tulane on the road at Navy. Midshipmen catching a full 7 at home now. Total sitting at 52.5. I do see a couple juice 6.5s out there, but mostly 7. Total sitting at 52.5 pretty much across the board. Let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Tulane offense against the Navy defense. This Tulane offense has caught fire. On the season, they're 19th in yards per play, 19th in success rate. Rushing numbers look great. Passing numbers very efficient. This is a run-first offense, but when they want to drop back to pass with MIZZ, they're certainly capable of doing so. They're 27th in yards per carry, 43rd in success rate per rush, 8th in yards per pass attempt, 8th in success rate per drop back. Offense is sitting at 27th in OFEI. This is looking like one of the strongest group of 5 teams in the country right now. Matched up against a Navy defense that's been okay. I mean, it's really a question of competition when it comes to the Navy defense. I mean, their numbers don't look terrible. 71st in yards per play, 72nd in success rate against the run, 80th in yards per carry allowed, 98th in success rate per rush. They haven't played the strongest schedule. We'll get into it in a second. But at first glance, this looks like a favorable matchup for Tulane offensively. Like I said, they've been red hot. In their last 7 games, a 7-game sample here, they're averaging over 44 points per game. Success rate all the way up close to 50%, 6.69 yards per play. This offense has been electric, and it's not just the run game. Like I said, this is a run-first offense. They're averaging over 256 rushing yards per game. Success rate per rush, 48.9%. 5.46 yards per carry as a team. That's over a 7-game sample size. But also, like I said, when they drop back to pass with MIZZ, they're certainly capable of doing that too. 199.4 passing yards per game, 9.66 yards per pass attempt, 51.5% success rate per dropback. So yeah, this Tulane offense is a problem. Yes, we can question their recent schedule a bit. I mean, there are a lot of bad defenses on this list. Louisiana, South Florida, UAB, Rice, North Texas, Charlotte, Temple. These are a lot of bad defenses, but honestly, how much better do we consider this Navy defense to be? I mean, on the season, they do have some solid looking numbers. They're allowing just 22.2 points per game, 41.6% success rate, 5.61 yards per play. I mean, these are decent numbers defensively, but the thing is with Navy, they've only played 2 games all season against offenses ranked in the top 100. In the top 100 of FEI ratings offensively, they've played 2 games. That's it. If we isolate those 2 games and then look at Navy's defensive numbers, I mean, they're allowing 47.5 points per game. This is against Notre Dame and Memphis, by the way. The only 2 games on Navy's schedule against teams that are ranked in the top 100 in OFEI. Allowing 47.5 points per game, over 7 yards per play, 52% success rate. And we mentioned how Tulane likes to run the ball. Look at their run defense numbers in those games. 6.91 yards per carry, over 269 rushing yards allowed per game, 64% success rate per rush. So this Navy defense does have some solid looking numbers on the full season, but if you look at the games where they actually played good offenses, Tulane is definitely a good offense. They got absolutely lit up. Tulane's offensive line should have no problem dominating this game, whether it's generating push in the run game or protecting Mensa. They should have the strong edge in both here. Navy, not much of a pass rush, and even if they did have a pass rush, Mensa's been great under pressure. He's a good athlete. He's able to escape sacks at a pretty high rate. So, I mean, even his numbers when pressured are pretty solid here. On paper, there's really not much that's going to point towards Navy making stops in this game. This Tulane offense has been a machine, and Navy defensively, when they've seen good offenses, they've looked pretty bad. But what about the other side of the ball? What about this Navy offense against Tulane's defense? Well, let's give some credit to the Tulane defense too, because they've been pretty good on this side of the ball. 40th in yards per play, 13th in success rate. Against the run, which is probably what we should be looking at, they're playing Navy. 73rd in yards per carry allowed, but 17th in success rate per rush, 59th in effective rush. Great numbers against the pass. Don't really come into play when you're playing Navy. Navy, obviously a run-first offense, 6th in yards per carry, 33rd in success rate per rush, 4th in effective rush. The thing is with this Navy offense, they look so strong in the first handful of games. 43.6 points per game, over 52% success rate, 7.73 yards per play. But look at their last 4 games. Down to 25.8 points per game, success rate down to 38%, just 5.12 yards per play. And you can point at the opponents and say, Kyle, Notre Dame's in there. Okay, but the other 3 defenses, Charlotte, Rice. Actually, Rice's defense has been surprisingly good this year, so I'll give them Rice. But South Florida, Charlotte, those are not good defenses. This Navy offense just hasn't been the same. And in case you're wondering how Tulane's been playing defensively, I mean, look at their last 7 games. They're allowing just 14.3 points per game, 4.72 yards per play. Overall defensive success rate, 30.3%. Look at their numbers against the run, 78.7 rushing yards allowed per game, just 3.52 yards per carry allowed, 30% success rate per rush. They've been excellent against the run. And when you look at the opponents, yeah, there's some bad teams here, but I mean, North Texas, that's a solid offense. South Florida, that's a decent offensive team. This Tulane defense is playing excellent as well. The strength of this Navy offense is generating push with the offensive line, 39th in line yards, 22nd in stuff rate. But look at Tulane's defensive front. They've been great. They're not getting blown off the line of scrimmage. They're 27th in line yards. So look, in my opinion, based on what we've seen the last 5 games, this should be more than a touchdown. I'm going to lay it with Tulane. There's a juice 6.5. I'm taking it. Give me Tulane minus 6.5 next game. Next up, we got 3 games in a row that I already recorded, so I'm just going to put them in right here. Texas, Arkansas, Utah, Colorado, Clemson, Pittsburgh. Texas is on the road here. Hogs catching 13.5. I do still see a couple 14s out there. But for the most part, we're looking at 13.5s across the board at the time of recording this. Total sitting at 57.5 pretty much across the board. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Texas offense against the Arkansas defense. Obviously, Texas should have the advantage on this side of the ball. Texas 14th in yards per play, 24th in success rate. Pretty well-rounded, but they rely on their passing attack with Quinn Ewers, 12th in yards per pass attempt, 41st in success rate. They can run the ball as well, though. 39th in yards per carry, 20th in success rate on the ground. Now, Arkansas's defense has been surprisingly good this year. I mean, look at their numbers against the run. 38th in yards per carry allowed, 19th in success rate per rush, 29th in effective rush. Numbers against the pass look bad, even worse after the last couple weeks. I mean, the Hogs just got cooked through the air in back-to-back games. Although the Mississippi State game, a lot of the production they give up through the air was in garbage time. They were up like 3 or 4 touchdowns. So I don't know how seriously we take those numbers, but last week for sure, they got absolutely smoked by Ole Miss, which is why they're back at 118th in yards per pass attempt, 119th in success rate per pass. So can Texas throw the ball in this Arkansas defense? Well, last game, it looked pretty good against Florida. 352 yards through the air, 44.1% success rate per dropback, 10.7 yards per pass attempt. So Texas had a real nice game. Quinn Ewers had a real nice game against Florida. But we can't ignore that the previous 3 games, this Texas passing attack was not looking right. Against Oklahoma, Georgia, and Vanderbilt, 249 yards through the air, 6.63 yards per attempt, 33.4% success rate per dropback is bad. Now, you might look at the 3 opponents and say, well, Kyle, Oklahoma and Georgia are in there. 2 elite defenses. Okay, that's fair, but Vanderbilt is in there as well. And by the way, Georgia, we just saw Ole Miss light Georgia's defense up through the air, and that was in bad weather. So let's not sit here and pretend that these defenses are impenetrable, because we just saw Ole Miss have no problems throwing the ball on Georgia. And Arkansas's numbers against the pass, like I said, the last 2 games, terrible. Over 435 passing yards allowed per game, 59.3% success rate per dropback, over 13 yards per attempt allowed. Terrible numbers against the pass in their last 2 games. The Mississippi State game, like I said, they were up huge and probably sitting back in cover 4, letting Mississippi State connect on these underneath throws. The Ole Miss game, inexcusable though. Ole Miss went off on Arkansas. That being said, it looks like Ole Miss is getting their shit together and is looking like arguably the best offense in college football right now. But no question, Arkansas secondary has looked questionable in their last 2 games. That being said, look at the right side of the screen here. Let's not forget that this Arkansas defense was looking pretty good in their 3 games before that against Texas A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. So against good competition, elite competition, just 6.5 yards per pass attempt allowed, just over 185 passing yards per game allowed, 42.3% success rate per dropback. So let's not sit here and pretend that this Arkansas defense is just god-awful and there's no way they could possibly make stops against Texas. We saw them giving Texas A&M, Tennessee, and LSU problems throwing the ball. So I think coming off a bye week, it might be a decent spot for Arkansas's pass defense to bounce back. Keep in mind, they run a lot of zone coverage. Quinn Ewers and the Texas passing attack, much better numbers against man coverage. Not that their numbers against zone coverage are bad, but much better passing numbers against man coverage. Arkansas runs a decent amount of zone. Like I said, coming off the bye week, I can see Arkansas's defense at home giving Quinn Ewers and the Texas passing attack some problems. We've seen teams do it. We just saw Vanderbilt give Quinn Ewers some problems. But what about the Texas rushing attack? Because we know this Texas offense is not one-dimensional. They are capable of running the ball. We saw it last week against Florida, 210 yards on the ground, over 6.7 yards per carry, 50% success rate per rush. 2 games before that, though, just 2.29 yards per carry as a team, 35.8% success rate per rush, just under 68 rushing yards per game in those 2. One of those games was against Vanderbilt. So I don't know how good this Texas rushing attack is either. And as far as Arkansas's defense goes, we can poke holes in their pass defense because we've seen them get lit up through the air in back-to-back games. They've been pretty solid against the run all year. Look at their last 5 games against SEC competition. Just 3.98 yards per carry allowed, 37.4% success rate per rush. This Arkansas defensive front has been pretty solid against the run. So I know we're all expecting Texas to come in here and just put up a 50-piece on Arkansas. I don't think so. I think Arkansas's defense is able to give Texas some problems. But now we flip it over to the other side of the ball, and this is where Arkansas may run into some problems. Texas defensively, it's official. I can poke holes in the Texas offense. I think we all can. But that Texas defense is some real shit. They're first in the country in yards per play, 17th in success rate. Look at their numbers against the pass. First in yards per pass attempt, 3rd in success rate per dropback, 1st in effective pass. This very well may be the best pass defense in the entire country. And by the way, they're pretty solid against the run as well. 16th in yards per carry allowed, 43rd in success rate per rush, 16th in effective rush. Arkansas's offense has been surprisingly good, even better than their defense. TENN Green seems to be the perfect fit. I didn't like the transfer when it first happened, but I was dead wrong. He looks awesome. They're 25th in yards per play, 9th in success rate. Passing numbers look pretty good. I mean, TENN Green really has looked good in this Arkansas offense. I mean, look at the last 4 games. Over 303 passing yards per game, 10.35 yards per pass attempt, 54.2% success rate per dropback. They've been moving the ball. They've been scoring points. The problem is nobody's been able to throw the ball in Texas all year. Just 135.3 passing yards allowed per game on the season. On the whole season, they're allowing less than 136 passing yards per game, 4.63 yards per pass. I mean, these are elite. This might be the best pass defense in the country. The talent discrepancy between the Texas defensive front and the Arkansas offensive line is pretty dramatic. I mean, I don't know how much push Arkansas is going to be able to generate in the run, and I don't know how much time they're able to give TENN Green in the pocket. Now, let's give some credit to TENN Green. He's actually done a great job handling pressure. He's a great athlete. I mean, hasn't turned the ball over, hasn't made a ton of downfield throws under pressure, but he doesn't take sacks. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's able to escape. So there's something, but I think the talent discrepancy is just too big here. I expect the Longhorns defensive front to give Green all kinds of problems in this game. And as far as the Arkansas rushing attack goes, I mean, they did have that one monster game against Mississippi State, 359 yards on the ground, 9.7 yards per carry. That is dramatically skewing their numbers. Because if you look at their rushing numbers over the last 6 games, you might think, oh, this rushing attack's pretty good. 4.24 yards per carry, 47% success rate per rush. But look what happens when we take those same last 6 games and remove the Mississippi State game. You could see it was dramatically skewing the numbers. In the last 5 games, minus the Mississippi State game, just 3.15 yards per carry as a team. So this is not a run game I believe in. And yes, Texas got run on last week by Florida, 197 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. But in their 8 games before that, they're allowing just 3.21 yards per carry, 36% success rate per rush. So I believe in this Texas defensive front. I'm not reading too much into the Florida game. Keep in mind, they were up huge in that game almost immediately. So pretty much that entire football game was played. Texas had a 3-4 touchdown lead. So again, I'm not reading too much into the Florida game. I believe in this Texas defense, which is why I want to go under here at 57.5. And I know that I just recently took an under in an Arkansas game against Ole Miss, and it wasn't even close. I mean, Ole Miss put up like 56 points by themselves or something. So I know I just took an under in an Arkansas game, and it failed miserably. But the thing is, this Texas offense, it's not Ole Miss. I think the way Ole Miss looks right now, they very well might be the most dangerous offense in the entire country. They're starting to look like the Ole Miss offense we were expecting to see coming into this season. And Texas, while a very talented offensive team, I would not put them on the same level as Ole Miss. I expect Arkansas's defense coming off the bye week to give us their best effort. So I like the under here, 57.5. As far as a side, I don't think this should be 2 touchdowns, so I would lean towards Arkansas. I'm really worried about Taylon Green here. I think he's going to be in a nightmare spot. I think Texas defense is going to be all over him. I can even see a couple turnovers, which probably hurts my under. So give me the under, 57.5. Lean towards Arkansas plus the 14 if you can get it. All right, like I said, we got Utah on the road at Folsom Field here. Colorado now laying 10.5. Looks like the 9.5s and the 10s are gone. Total sitting at 47.5. Let's get into this one. We'll start with some head-to-head history. Been a pretty one-sided rivalry here. Utah is 10-1 in their last 11 games against Colorado. The Buffs have covered the number, 2-1 against the spread in their last 3. So it's been very one-sided. Obviously, this year is very different. Colorado, the much better team. I don't know if that's ever been the case, not since 2016, which is actually the last time Colorado won. It was also the last time they were favored. So let's match these two teams up on the field. We'll start with the Utes offense against the Colorado defense, and this is a mismatch in favor of Colorado. Not what we were expecting this season. Utah has been a terrible offensive team. Obviously, we were expecting Cam Rising to be playing quarterback this year. That hasn't been the case, and Colorado has exceeded all expectations defensively. Look at this Colorado defense, 26th in the country in yards per play allowed, 31st in success rate. They're great against the run, great against the pass, flirting with an idea of being a top 25 defense. In fact, if you ask me, they might be close to being a top 25 defense right now. And look at the left side of this graphic. The Utah offense has been dreadful, to put it delicately. And what makes things even worse for the Utah offense is they seem to be getting worse as the season progresses. They're definitely trending in the wrong direction here. Through the first 4 games, they were averaging 33 points per game, over 6.1 yards per play. In their last 5 games, they're averaging 14.2 points per game. They're averaging 14.2 points per game, under 5 yards per play. Success rate as a team, 33.3%. So yeah, it's been tough sledding for this Utah offense. They've been absolutely terrible, and this Colorado defense is on the opposite trajectory here. In their last 3 games, they're allowing just 19 points per game, 4.73 yards per play, success rate under 35%. Colorado's playing out of their minds defensively. Now, I know we did see the Utah rushing attack get going against BYU last week. 147 yards on the ground, 4.9 yards per carry, 43.3% success rate per rush. So that's a good sign if you're Utah, because we know that's what this Utah offense wants to do. They want to run the ball, but we can't ignore what they did in the previous 4 games before that. Under 96 rushing yards per game, 3.35 yards per carry, 35.4% success rate per rush. So I'm not going to let one game against BYU trick me into thinking I can trust this Utah run game right now. I don't. And Colorado's been playing tough defense against the run this entire season. On the year, they're allowing just 151 rushing yards per game, success rate per rush under 40%, 3.93 yards per carry. So, yeah, Utah's got an offensive line. They've got a talented RB there, but I don't trust them. I don't trust them to even run the ball in this game. I think Colorado's defense is going to give Utah all kinds of problems in this one. But what about on the other side of the ball? What about the matchup for the Colorado offense? Well, obviously, this is the strength of the Utah team, the defense, right? 35th in yards per play. They actually lead the country in overall defensive success rate. They're sitting at first. Great numbers against the run, even better numbers against the pass, which obviously comes in handy against this Colorado offense that's very reliant on the pass. They don't even try to run the ball, but when they do run it, they're not very successful. 130th in yards per carry, 77th in success rate per run, 117th in effective rush. Obviously, we know one of the most dynamic passing attacks in the country, though. 29th in yards per pass attempt, 23rd in success rate per dropback, 7th in effective pass. Now, we do have to point out that Colorado really didn't have the best offensive game last week against Texas Tech. I know they finished the game with 41 points on the board, but just 6.8 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback under 38%. A little bit concerning. I mean, that was on the road in Lubbock, a tough place to go play, and they still won the game comfortably. But definitely passing numbers, efficiency-wise, were down. But still, I mean, look at the 5 games before that. This passing attack's been very reliable. Over 318 passing yards per game, 8.9 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback up close to 48%. Now, if you're taking the points with Utah in this game, you're looking right here. In their last 3 games, they are not getting thrown on. just 5.9 yards per pass attempt allowed, 34.1% success rate per dropback, 181 passing yards allowed per game. And that's against BYU. Retzlaff can throw it. Houston, okay, Houston can't do anything offensively. And TCU, Hoover can definitely throw it. So Utah playing very good defense against the pass. The thing is, in this particular matchup, I mean, on the road in Colorado, this Colorado passing attack's on a different level. And Utah defensively, if we were talking about this matchup last year, I would say this is an ultimate mismatch. The Utah defensive front against the Colorado offensive line. And it's still a mismatch. Utah's defensive line is much better than Colorado's offensive line. The thing is, the gap just isn't as big as it was last year. Colorado's offensive line, I mean, it hasn't played well, but it hasn't been practical joke terrible. Seemed to be improving as the year goes along. And Utah's defensive line, although we are seeing the pressure numbers rise a little bit, not the pass rush we're used to seeing from Utah. Just 40th in pressure rate, 92nd in sack rate. This is not the usual top 10 pass rush Utah defensive front we're used to seeing. They've been very good about staying on the line of scrimmage against the run, but as far as pressuring the passer, they're not towards the top of the, I almost said the NFL, not towards the top of the FBS this year, which means Shedeur Sanders is going to have some clean pockets to throw from. And guess what? Utah runs a lot of man coverage. In fact, 9th most in the FBS. 9th in man coverage frequency. Colorado, as I'm sure you've guessed, they cook on man coverage. I mean, you can't cover those Colorado receivers. So maybe if Utah's pass rush shows up and looks like last year's Utah's pass rush, I can see it. Shedeur Sanders under pressure. But on the road, based on what we've seen this year, Colorado should have no problem making throws on this Utah defense, which is why there's no way I can take Utah here, even up at plus 10.5. I can't do it. I will say now that it's up over 10, I'm not going to lay it with Colorado either, but how about Utah's team total, 17.5? How about the under? Colorado's defense is playing out of their minds. Utah offensively is about as bad as it gets. The only way I see Utah getting up over 17 points is if Shedeur Sanders turns the ball over, but he's done a good job with that. So I'm going to take Utah team total under 17.5. Lean Colorado minus the points, but now that it's up over 10, I'm not going to do that. Utah team total under. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the pie charts. According to this data, actions coming in on the Clemson side, just over 55% of the tickets, about 75% of the money. Take this data with a grain of salt. So let's match these teams up on the field. We'll start with the Clemson offense. They run a fast pace. Wow. 9th in the country in plays per game, 39th in pass frequency. So they do want to throw the ball with Klubnik, but they can also run it. It's Clemson. They're pretty well rounded. In fact, look at the rushing efficiency numbers here. 10th in yards per carry on the season, 14th in success rate per rush. Passing numbers back at 63rd in yards per pass attempt, 45th in success rate per dropback. As a whole, they're sitting at 19th in yards per play. Matched up against a Pitt defense that, look, we can point at the Pitt offense and say they've fallen off a cliff, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Pitt defense has really surprised me this year. They lost all 4 defensive linemen. You've probably heard me say this like 4 times already, but they lost all 4 defensive linemen from last year and their D-line coach. So coming into the season, I was like, guys, this Pitt defense isn't going to be able to stop the run. It's been I don't think I've ever been more wrong on a take. Look at their numbers against the run. 8th in yards per carry, 29th in success rate per rush, 39th in effective rush. It's been the strength of their team. The strongest aspect of this Pittsburgh team has been the run defense. So I was so wrong about that. And the Pitt defense as a whole is still standing strong, even though the offense, like I said, has kind of fallen off a cliff. They're 14th in yards per play, 30th in success rate. So will this Pittsburgh defense be able to make stops against this high-powered Clemson offense? Well, one thing we're learning about this Clemson offense is they might be a little more vulnerable than we thought. Remember, they started off the year, their opener was against Georgia. They looked terrible. They got beat by like 28 points or whatever it was. After that, they rattled off 6 or 7 straight games where they looked like the most unstoppable offense in college football. But now, if you look at their last 2 games, just 219.5 passing yards per game, 38.4% success rate per dropback, 5.15 yards per pass attempt. That was against Louisville and Virginia Tech. In the previous 6 games, you can see on the graphic, they were absolutely lighting it up, pretty much scoring on every goddamn drive. So the last 2 games against Louisville and Virginia Tech, we're seeing this Clemson passing attack look a bit vulnerable. Here are the Clemson passing numbers in their 4 games not at Clemson. They had 3 road games and then the neutral site game against Georgia. Just 232.8 passing yards per game, 6.5 yards per attempt, 42.3% success rate per dropback. The 4 games away from Clemson, it was 3 bad games from Klubnik and one great game, and the great game is against Wake Forest. In case you're not familiar with Wake Forest football, they don't play a lot of defense over there in Wake Forest. So I don't know if I trust Klubnik on the road here against, like I said, a Pitt defense that's been rock solid. Yes, SMU was able to put up a big number. They made a few huge plays through the air. 9.9 yards per pass attempt, 306 yards through the air. Just 37.5% success rate per dropback in that game. So yeah, SMU was able to score points against Pitt. But look at everyone else. 244.9 passing yards allowed per game, 38.4% success rate per dropback, under 6.8 yards per pass attempt. And specifically, look how this defense performs at home. On the season, at home in Pittsburgh, they're allowing just 22 points per game, success rate under 37%, just 4.25 yards per play. 230.8 passing yards allowed per game, 6.54 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback under 37%. Look at the opponents. Kent State, okay, there's Kent State in there, but West Virginia, Cal, Syracuse, Virginia, these are formidable offenses. In fact, a couple of them are pretty good. West Virginia's got a dominant rushing attack. Cal's got Mendoza. Syracuse has got McCord, one of the most dynamic passing attacks in the country. Virginia's got what the hell is his name? Costanza? What's his name? Virginia quarterback. Calandria, sorry. Virginia's got Calandria. That's a good passing offense. So it's not like they've seen nobody in these home games. And this Pittsburgh defense at home is a unit I trust. And if you're expecting Clemson to run the ball, I'm not sure about that. Pittsburgh allowing under 2.9 yards per carry this season, 37.2% success rate per rush, under 110 rushing yards allowed per game. And the Clemson rushing attack, yeah, it was looking dominant there. Look last week against Virginia Tech on the road, just 3.63 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 38%. So overall on this side of the ball, I know when we talk about the Pittsburgh offense, we've lost faith, and there's good reason for that. We're about to talk about that in a second. But when it comes to the Pitt defense, especially at home, I'm still a believer, and I think this Clemson offense might be a bit more vulnerable than we originally thought. I think Pitt's defense is able to give them some problems. Now, what about on the other side of the ball? Let's talk about the Pitt offense. And when we look at this graphic here, it might look like these two units are decently evenly matched. I mean, 51st in yards per play, 53rd in success rate for Pitt, 45th and 48th for the Clemson defense. You might look at this graphic and say, okay, Pitt's offense can compete with Clemson's defense. No, they can't. First of all, Clemson's defense, we've talked about this multiple times, these numbers are wildly skewed. They've had so many points scored on them in garbage time of games. NC State scored 28 points in the fourth quarter of a game where Clemson was up 7 scores. App State put 20 points on them in garbage time. There's been several games this year where Clemson gave up 20-plus points in garbage time of games when they were up big. So when we pull up a graphic like this here, you might look at the left side of this graphic and say, oh, this Clemson pass defense is vulnerable. See, these teams, they had good games throwing the ball on Clemson. The only one that applies to is Georgia. The NC State game, Clemson was up, I think, 40. And CJ Bailey came in, or CJ Bailey was already in. CJ Bailey, they drove down the field and scored 28 points. I mean, they still lost by 20 plus. It was completely in garbage time. Same goes for Virginia. They drove up and down the field twice in the fourth quarter to backdoor cover. The game was over. So NC State and Virginia saying, oh, they were able to throw the ball on Clemson's defense, that's not really an accurate depiction at all. And by the way, that elite passing attack that we saw from Holstein early in the season, I mean, it's fallen off a cliff. In their first 5 games, they were averaging almost 340 passing yards per game, success rate per dropback up close to 48%, over 9 yards per pass attempt. Look at their last 4 games. I mean, again, falling off a cliff. Under 200 passing yards per game, success rate per dropback under 38%, under 5.5 yards per pass attempt. So the success they were finding with Holstein early in the season has not been there. This Pitt passing attack is no longer much of a threat. And if you're thinking Pitt's going to run the ball in this game, I mean, look at the last 5 games. They're averaging under 4 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 38%, 117.2 rushing yards per game. Clemson, I mean, you don't run the ball in Clemson. They're allowing 3.34 yards per carry as a team in their last 5 games, just 85.4 rushing yards allowed per game. So Pitt probably not going to be able to run the ball either. And even if you are an Eli Holstein believer, even if you're a Pitt fan or you're like, Kyle, now this is the big game, Holstein's going to bounce back and get up for this one, keep in mind Clemson runs a ton of man coverage. They're actually 15th in the country in man coverage frequency. Holstein has done all of his damage against zone. In fact, his passing numbers against man coverage are absolutely terrible. So no, I very, very seriously doubt Holstein's going to be able to make throws in this game. I think it's a nightmare matchup for the Pittsburgh offense, which is why when it comes to betting this game, as much as I would love to take that plus 10.5 at home here, I don't trust Pitt to score any points. Unfortunately, I am a believer in this Pitt defense, and I think the Clemson offense might be a bit overvalued in a tough spot here. I think Pitt's defense is able to make stops. So as far as betting it, I would go under. Personally, I took the Pittsburgh team total under 21.5. I already bet that. That's what I took. Not mad at a full game total under either, but taking the Pitt team total under protects me against if Clemson just runs the score up, which we know they're capable of doing. So Pitt team total under 21.5. Let's do it. All right, next up, we're in the Big Ten. We got Ohio State on the road at Northwestern. Northwestern catching 28.5 points at home in this one. Total sitting at 43.5 or 44, depending on your sports book. Not going to spend a ton of time on this one. Obviously, it's a mismatch. Ohio State's third in OFEI. Northwestern's defense 36th. Northwestern does have a defense. They can defend the run. They can pressure the passer. They're actually 22nd in yards per carry allowed, 48th in success rate per rush. But on the other side of the ball, I don't know how we can expect Northwestern to put up a single point in this game. Betting this game comes down to, do you think Northwestern even reaches double digits? But I could see Ohio State's offense having some problems here on the road. It would only be Northwestern plus the points or pass. I mean, I guess you could say it's also a bit of a look-ahead spot for Ohio State. They have Indiana on deck, which is looking like a huge game. So, I mean, Northwestern plus 28.5 or pass, but I doubt I put any money on this game. Next, we're staying in the Big Ten. We got Michigan State on the road at Illinois. Illini laying 3 points at home. Total sitting at 47.5. Let's get into this one, and we'll start with the Michigan State offense against the Illinois defense. And honestly, the story of this game, in my opinion, is just strength of schedule. Michigan State has been through the absolute gauntlet in terms of their recent opponents. So we look at these numbers here. Michigan State's 89th in yards per play, 67th in success rate. Rushing numbers not looking great, but again, they've been through the gauntlet. They're just 116th in yards per carry, 58th in success rate per rush. Passing numbers are actually looking okay considering who they played. 37th in yards per attempt, 77th in success rate per dropback, 50th in effective pass. Good news is they're matched up against an Illinois defense that doesn't even come close to comparing to their last 5 games. Illinois, 76 in yards per play allowed, 121st in success rate. This Illinois defense cannot stop their opponents from moving the chains. And despite playing a crazy schedule, Aiden Childs is still making throws. In Michigan State's last 5 games, first of all, look at the opponents. Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan, Indiana. Are you crazy? I mean, those are the 5 best defenses in the conference right there, probably. In those 5 games, Aiden Childs is actually still posting some decent numbers. 212.8 passing yards per game, 42% success rate per dropback, over 8.1 yards per pass attempt. This is an Illinois defense that's been struggling to defend the pass. They've been struggling to defend the run as well. In their last 6 games, they're allowing over 241 passing yards per game, 48.9% success rate per dropback. Illinois really struggling to get off the field defensively, 8.2 yards per attempt. So this is looking like a prime spot for Aiden Childs to finally have a big game, considering he seems to be playing an elite defense every single week. Illinois most definitely not an elite defense. Now, you can point at the fact that they've played good defense against the pass in their last 2 games at home, just 6.15 yards per pass attempt, but one of those home games was against Michigan, and Jack Tuttle was playing quarterback in that game. I'm not going to throw Illinois a parade for shutting down Jack Tuttle. When we look at the battle on the line of scrimmage, it may look like Illinois has the advantage here, but we have to keep in mind, this Michigan State offensive line just played Oregon, Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan, Indiana. Are those not the 5 best defensive fronts in the Big Ten? You put any 5 offensive lines against that schedule, and they're going to have terrible numbers. I mean, those are 5 of the best defensive fronts in the entire country. So I'm not so sure that Illinois' defensive front has the advantage here over Michigan State's offensive line. Like I said about Aiden Childs, seems like a spot for Michigan State's offensive line to finally win some battles. Now, we have seen Aiden Childs' production dip a bit when pressured. Turnover-worthy play rate, I mean, not good with a clean pocket either, but it goes from a C- to an F, QB rating B- to a D+. So if you don't believe in this Michigan State offensive line, you can point at the Illinois pass rush, which actually has been pretty good, and say Aiden Childs is going to struggle. But personally, I think the Michigan State State offensive line might be slightly better than those numbers indicate. And as far as the run game goes, I know if you look at Michigan State's last 5 games, again, 2.63 yards per carry. That's terrible. Still a 46.4% success rate per rush. So they're still moving the chains on the ground. And what have we been talking about with this Illinois defense the whole time? They can't get off the field. Look at their run defense in their last 5 games. 57.1% success rate per rush. They cannot stop their opponent from moving the chains. They're allowing 5.32 yards per carry. So even the Michigan State run game, which hasn't really been there, I expect that to be there in this one. Keep in mind, Michigan State has 2 good RBs. We haven't really been able to see it in the last 5 games because they're playing such elite defenses. I think they're going to be able to run the ball as well. So I like the matchup for Michigan State offensively in this one. But what about the other side? What about the Michigan State defense against Illinois' offense? This one is more of a toss-up, in my opinion. I mean, if you go by FEI ratings, these 2 units are evenly matched. Michigan State's defense is 50th. Illinois' offense is 49th. I mean, yards per play, 58th to 80th. Success rate, 57 to 58. Looks pretty even across the board. Illinois offensively is a pretty tough unit to get a feel for. Altmaier early in the season was cooking up on some good defenses. We've seen him struggle recently. Illinois couldn't run the ball at all early in the season, but they're actually running the ball recently. So really don't have a feel for this Illinois offense. You can see here in their last 3 games, they're averaging under 156 passing yards per game, 39% success rate per dropback, 5.2 yards per pass attempt. I mean, it was against Michigan, Oregon, and Minnesota, so they've played some tough defenses. Michigan State probably doesn't fit that description. In their last 5 games, they're allowing 32 points per game, 6.25 yards per play, 45% success rate. Now, they have seen, again, Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. Iowa's got a run game. Michigan doesn't have a good offense. So, again, they've been through the gauntlet, so it's really tough to get a feel for this Michigan State defense as well. And to make this side even more confusing, look at this. Illinois in their last 3 games running the ball. They couldn't run the ball at all early in the season. Over 148 rushing yards per game, 4.49 yards per carry, 47.7% success rate per rush. So, I mean, on this side, in my opinion, it feels like such a question mark. What do we even think of the Michigan State run defense? In their last 2 games, 4.13 yards per carry, 39% success rate. In the 3 before that, 5.59 yards per carry. I mean, there's too many moving parts on this side of the ball. As far as Illinois' offense against Michigan State's defense, I feel like it's a coin flip. I wouldn't be surprised if Illinois scores 40 points in this game. I also wouldn't be surprised if they're held to 14. In my opinion, the way I'm looking at this matchup, there's just way too much variance on that side, but I do like the matchup on the other side. Michigan State offensively, I think they're able to move the ball and score points on Illinois. So I lean towards the Michigan State side, but the bet I actually placed, Michigan State team total over 22.5. I already bet this. Michigan State team total over. Next game. Syracuse is on the road here. Cal's laying 9 or 9. I actually see an 8.5 too. So anywhere in between 8.5 and 9.5, depending on what time you're watching this. Total sitting at 57.5 pretty much across the board. Let's get into this one, and it's pretty clear what type of football game we should expect to see. Both these teams throw the ball a lot. Both move at a fast pace. 4th in pace is Syracuse. 12th in pace is Cal. Passing frequency, Syracuse is 3rd. Cal is 27th. So that would explain why the total for this one sitting at 57.5. We should see a lot of possessions, a lot of points. Let's start with the matchup for Syracuse offensively. Like we just said, this is an offense that wants to throw the ball with Kyle McCord. They're 69th in yards per pass attempt, 13th in success rate per dropback, 6th in effective pass. This should be a tough matchup for McCord. Cal's defense has been great this year. They're 17th in yards per play, 52nd in success rate. They've been great against the run, which doesn't come into play much here because all Syracuse does is throw it. But look at their numbers against the pass. 48th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 54th in success rate per dropback, 30th in effective pass. So definitely a tough matchup for McCord. But you know what else was a tough matchup for Kyle McCord? Virginia Tech, and they won that game outright in overtime, 38-31. In their last 2 games, Syracuse averaging 336 passing yards per game, 49.2% success rate per dropback, 8 yards per attempt. Boston College, okay. We've seen that defense look really good and really bad this year. But Virginia Tech, that's one of the best pass rushes in college football. Syracuse was moving the ball, put up a lot of points in that game. And here's the thing when it comes to Cal's defense. You look at these numbers right here. These are Cal's numbers against the pass on the season. They look excellent. 6.38 yards per pass attempt allowed, success rate per dropback under 38%, under 228 passing yards allowed per game. So it looks like an elite pass defense, and they are good. But if you look at their schedule, how many passing attacks have they really seen? I mean, Auburn, maybe a little bit. San Diego State, especially early in the year, could not throw the ball. Florida State, laugh out loud funny. They saw Miami. There's one. Pitt, Pitt, the second half of the year, hasn't been able to throw the ball. I mean, Holstein fell off a cliff. NC State, there's another one. Oregon State, Wake Forest. So you could argue that Florida State, NC State, and maybe Pitt, Miami, NC State, and maybe Pitt. First of all, those are 3 of their 4 losses right there, all in a row. Second of all, look what happens if you isolate the Miami and NC State games, and both of those games were at home. They allowed over 385 passing yards per game, 47.1% success rate per dropback, 8.6 yards per attempt. These are the only 2 passing attacks on Cal's schedule that I would put on Syracuse level, and neither of them had problems throwing the ball on Cal. Like I said, the 3 games against decent passing attacks, 3 of their 4 losses. I think Syracuse is going to be able to move the ball. Now, there's probably not going to be much run support because McCord never has run support. In the last 7 games, Syracuse is averaging under 78 rushing yards per game, 2.59 yards per carry, 44.7% success rate per rush, indicating they're good in short yardage situations. But as a whole, this isn't much of a rushing attack. Cal's been great against the run, 3 yards per carry allowed in the last 7. So Syracuse is not going to be able to run the ball, but like I said, they don't want to run the ball. This is a pass-first offense all the way, 3rd in passing frequency. We've seen this Cal defense get thrown on when they've seen good passing offenses. I think Syracuse is going to move the ball, score points in this game. But then we flip it over to the other side and look at the matchup for Cal's offense, and this is where the value for Syracuse disappears. I mean, this is not a great defense, 92nd in yards per play, 101st in success rate. They struggle against the run. They're actually slightly better against the pass, so I guess that's something. Cal is an offense that has to throw the ball because the run game hasn't been there all year. Look at Cal's rushing numbers, 107th in yards per carry, 103rd in success rate per rush. Jaden Ott's been banged up. I mean, Cal hasn't been able to run the ball all season. This is a pass-first offense all the way. Syracuse has been slightly better against the pass, but I mean, we've seen this defense get cooked as well. And Cal's offense seems to be finding a bit of a groove here. In their last 4 games, they're averaging 32 points per game, success rate over 45%, 5.6 yards per play. Look at the passing numbers. Over 325 passing yards per game, 52% success rate per dropback. Yes, these 4 games are against some questionable defenses, but I consider Syracuse to be a questionable defense also. In their last 5 games, they're allowing over 33 points per game, over 6.6 yards per play. So I don't really trust this Syracuse defense. Okay, they're slightly better against the pass, but look at their last 5 games. They're allowing over 5 yards per carry, 44% success rate per rush. But look at their numbers against the pass. So I don't care if their season-long numbers indicate that they're slightly better against the pass. If you look at their numbers, I mean, they're getting thrown on also. So I really don't trust this Syracuse defense at all. I suppose you can look right here if you're looking to back Syracuse. They do have a bit of a pass rush. They're 59th in pressure rate, 36th in sack rate, 48th in pass rush grade. Cal's offensive line has been struggling all year. So if you're looking to take the points with Syracuse in this one, you can point at the pass rush. We've seen Mendoza take a lot of sacks this year. D+ pressure to sack rate. So that's something if you like Syracuse. Personally, I don't really trust this Syracuse defense at all, which is really making placing a bet in this game tough. In my opinion, this line is kind of crazy. I mean, 9.5. If we pull up Syracuse schedule, what on here indicates that they should be getting 9.5 from anybody, let alone Cal? I mean, the loss to Stanford was pretty bad. They got blown out by Pittsburgh, but that's because McCord threw 3 pick sixes, 5 interceptions in the game. I mean, outside of the Pittsburgh game where they didn't even get beat, they beat themselves. I don't see anything here that points to Syracuse getting 9.5 points. I mean, I have this one at like 6.5. Line seems a little sketchy. I lean towards the Syracuse side, but personally, I think the game goes over. So it'll be over 57.5. Syracuse plus the points. Syracuse team total over, somewhere in there. As of right now, I haven't placed a bet on this game, but that's where I'm leaning. Over, Syracuse plus the points, Syracuse team total over. Next game. Let's talk Mountain West. We got Hawaii on the road at Utah State. Aggies catching 2.5 points at home. Total sitting at 59.5 or 60.5, depending on your sportsbook. Let's get into this one, and we'll start with the matchup for the Hawaii offense against the Utah defense, which has been awful this year, man. Utah State has been a bad defensive team, 130th in yards per play, 127th in success rate. They're bad against the run. They're bad against the pass. So even though you look at the left side of this graphic and you're like, Hawaii's offense isn't any good, which is true, it's not any good. Everybody has been able to score on Utah State. Temple put up like 40 points on Utah State. If you look at their defensive numbers over the last 8 games, they're allowing over 45 points per game, 47.7% success rate, 7.15 yards per play. It's been bad. That being said, Hawaii's offense really isn't good. In their last 6 games against a lot of questionable Mountain West opponents, they're averaging just 20.5 points per game, 42.1% success rate, 5.1 yards per play. And the thing with this Hawaii offense is they're much better at home I don't know. Are they in Honolulu? They're in Hawaii somewhere. I don't know if it's Honolulu. But in their home games, they're averaging over 25 points per game, 45.6% success rate, 5.66 yards per play. Look at their offensive numbers in their road games. Just 17 points per game, 4.73 yards per play. This is a really bad offense on the road. And Utah State, we just pointed out how terrible their defense is. Well, they're actually better at home. In the road games, they're allowing 45.8 points per game, 50.9% success rate, over 7 yards per play. Not that the numbers at home are great, but they're certainly better. Points per game allowed drops to 38, and when it comes to points per game in a Utah State game, they throw the ball and run a fast pace. Each team gets a lot of possessions. It's kind of like Texas Tech. Look at the success rate. 41.7%. That's really not that bad. 6.6 yards per play obviously isn't good, but it's better than their defensive numbers on the road. I'm just saying, at home against a Hawaii offense that's been terrible on the road, coming off a heartbreak loss at home against UNLV where Hawaii could have realistically won the game. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a better defensive effort from Utah State, despite this being a really bad defense. And on the other side of the ball, this Utah offense, since Spencer Petras came back from injury, has actually been pretty dangerous. On the year, they're 51st in yards per play, 64th in success rate. They can run it a little bit, but this is an offense that wants to throw it. 89th in yards per pass, and then 50th in success rate, 55th in effective pass. Now, they're matched up against a Hawaii defense that's been surprisingly good this year. 64th in yards per play, 36th in success rate. Pretty decent against the run, solid against the pass. But like I said, since Spencer Petras has come back from injury, this Utah State offense has been pretty good. He's got over 2,000 yards passing. Remember, he missed the first 3 games of the year. 7 yards per attempt, 15 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. If you look at the Utah State offense during that span, Utah State's averaging over 32 points per game, 46.5% success rate, over 6 yards per play. They've been scoring points, and yeah, there's some questionable opponents in there, but there's also Boise State. There's also UNLV. This Utah State offense is turning into a unit I trust, especially at home. Hawaii defensively runs a lot of man coverage. They're 38th in the country in man coverage frequency. Utah State, much better passing numbers against man coverage. I think they're going to score points, and in my opinion, Hawaii should not be laying here. I think this one should be about a pick 'em, so a +2.5. For me, it's got to be Utah State. I personally think the better bet might be Hawaii team total under. Let me get you the exact number on that. I haven't bet this one yet. I'm personally trying to get a Utah State +3, and there's only 2.5s open right now, so I figured I'd wait, see if I can get a +3. Hawaii's team total is at you can get a 31.5. It's juice, but Hawaii team total under 31.5. Like I said before, they're averaging 17 points per game in their road games. This is not a good offense. I like Utah State's defense to show up. Look, they're not going to be great. They're a bad defense, but I think we're going to see a better effort from them defensively. So my picks for this game, Utah State plus the points, but I'm hoping for a 3, and Hawaii team total under 31.5. Next game, Louisville on the road at Stanford. Stanford catching 20.5 points at home, total sitting at 57.5. Let's get into this one. We'll start with the Louisville offense. This is a unit that wants to pass first, 25th in passing frequency. And when you pull up these numbers right here, it looks like a favorable matchup for the Cards offensively. They're 19th in yards per pass attempt, 37th in success rate per dropback, 13th in effective pass. Stanford's been terrible trying to stop the pass all year. 130th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 117th in success rate per dropback, 110th in effective pass. So on paper, Louisville should have no problem making throws against this Stanford defense, even on the road. Tyler Shuck's having a great season, 2,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. In their last 5 games, they're averaging over 265 passing yards per game, 45.8% success rate per dropback. That's against much tougher defenses than Stanford, who's been getting thrown all over. In their last 5 games, they're allowing over 10.2 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback all the way up close to 50%. So yeah, Louisville should have no problem throwing the ball in this Stanford secondary. I guess you could say Stanford runs a lot of zone coverage and Louisville's got better passing numbers against man coverage, I guess. But there's really not much here that indicates Stanford's capable of making stops against Tyler Shuck in this Louisville passing attack. So the Cards are definitely going to score. But when we flip it over to the other side, we might be able to find some value on Stanford. Not that the Stanford offense has been any good. They're 128th in yards per play, 99th in success rate. Rushing numbers look okay. Passing numbers, 133rd in yards per pass attempt this season. And you might look at the left side of this graphic and think, how are they going to score on Louisville's defense? Not that Louisville's defense has been elite, But I mean, 64th in yards per play, 56 in success rate, decent numbers against the run, decent numbers against the pass. But the thing is, this Stanford offense seems to be figuring their shit out. If you remember earlier in the season, Ashton Daniels got hurt. He was banged up for a couple games. He's back, and now that he's healthy, the Stanford offense has shown some signs of life. In the last 2 games, they're averaging 26 points per game, 50% success rate, over 6.2 yards per play. Those are solid offensive numbers. In comparison to the previous 4 games, they were averaging under 10 points per game, 35.1% success rate, 3.82 yards per play. Now, you can point at the fact that Stanford's last 2 games were against Wake Forest and NC State, not exactly tough defenses, but honestly, this Louisville defense hasn't looked all that great. In their last 3 games, they're allowing over 33 points per game, 44.8% success rate, 5.63 yards per play. So it's not like this Cards defense has been locked down. And the Stanford run game that hadn't been there all year is finally showing up. In their last 2 games, they're averaging over 5.3 yards per carry as a team, almost a 50% success rate per rush. So Stanford's starting to figure it out as far as running the ball, which makes sense because Stanford brought back a lot of production on the offensive line. The offensive line was terrible last year, but they brought back experience. Stanford, a program known for developing offensive linemen, so it's not surprising that the Stanford offensive line is figuring it out as the season progresses. I expected them to be much better towards the end of the season. So we're seeing Stanford run the ball a little bit in their last 2 games, and Louisville's been struggling to stop the run. In their last 3 games, they're allowing 4.86 yards per carry, 51% success rate per rush, just under 200 rushing yards per game. So look, I don't feel comfortable laying 3 touchdowns on the road with Louisville here. Tyler Shuck's going to make some throws. Louisville's going to score some points, but I think Stanford might be able to run the ball in this one. Also, Louisville has 0 chance of making it into the college football playoff with 3 losses. I mean, they have to win the ACC, and they've not really a realistic chance of doing that. The reason I'm bringing that up is I'm not sure how much incentive there is for Louisville to beat Stanford by 30 points. I mean, they just need to win, and they need other teams to lose to sneak into the ACC championship game. If I'm wrong on that, correct me in the comments, but I don't know how much incentive Louisville has to win this game by 30 points. So I think Stanford's offense is able to move the ball a bit. Give me Stanford plus 20.5. Do I actually bet this? Probably not. Next game. Boston College on the road at SMU. SMU is laying 19.5 points at home here. Total sitting at 53.5 or 54, depending on your sports book. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Boston College offense. This is an offense that wants to run the ball. They're 16th in run frequency so far this year. Haven't done a great job at it. 83rd in yards per carry, 106 in success rate per rush. And they're going to be in a situation here against the SMU defensive line. Look at their numbers against the run this year. 4th in yards per carry allowed, 8th in success rate per rush, 15th in effective rush. Nobody's been able to run the ball on SMU this year. Look at the discrepancy here between the SMU defensive line and the Boston College offensive line. BC is 88th in line yards, 68th in stuff rate. SMU 12th and 12th. So on the road, I'm not expecting BC to be able to generate any push in the run game at all. I will say we did see Boston College get the run game going a bit in their last game, and that was the first time we had seen it in a long time. The first 2 games of the season, they were averaging 5.91 yards per carry, over 286 rushing yards per game. But then there was a 6-game stretch where they couldn't run the ball at all. Majority of this season, they were not able to run the ball. But then last game against Syracuse, over 6.1 yards per carry, 313 yards on the ground in that game. But the thing is, that was Syracuse. This is SMU. On the season, SMU's allowing just 2.82 yards per carry, 91.1 rushing yards per game. Success rate per rush down at 34.1%. Nobody's been able to run the ball in this SMU defensive front. So even though Boston College did get the run game going finally against Syracuse last week, I don't trust it to be there. And as far as Grayson James taking over at quarterback, he was 5 of 6, 51 yards and a touchdown last week against Syracuse, but I mean, I don't trust the Boston College passing attack with Castellanos or with Grayson James, especially against this defense. So, yeah, not a ton of faith here in the Boston College offense on the road. Now, as far as the SMU offense against the Boston College defense, the matchup on this side of the ball is actually a little bit closer. Boston College defensively, DFEI is at 54th. SMU's offense is at 30th. SMU is an offense that wants to run the ball, but we know they can throw it as well. They're 25th in yards per play, 52nd in success rate, 62nd in yards per carry, 42nd in success rate, 8th in yards. You can see all the numbers here. On the Boston College side, they've actually done a pretty solid job against the run this year, and the SMU offense actually hasn't looked quite as explosive in the last 2 games. Here's the thing, though. An SMU offensive output that isn't quite as explosive is still 38 points per game, 42.8% success rate, 6.6 yards per play. And I know you might be looking at this graphic thinking, what do you mean the offensive output is down a bit for SMU? This is actually way lower than their normal offensive output. In the games leading up to those two, they were averaging like 7.7 yards per play. So offensive output slightly down, but even if it's slightly down, it's still one of the most, if not the most explosive offense in the conference. Now, like I said, this Boston College defense has done a solid job against the run. They did get run all over by Virginia Tech. They bounced back. 2.95 yards per carry allowed in their last two games. 47% success rate per rush isn't good at all, though. But look at the passing matchup here. In the last 5 games, SMU's averaging 10.8 yards per pass attempt, over 286 passing yards per game, matched up against a Boston College defense that's getting thrown on by everybody. So I don't trust this Boston College secondary at all. Even if I did trust the Boston College defensive front against the run, which I really don't, but even if I did, SMU could still cover this number by throwing the ball. So it would only be SMU here. They don't have any reason to take their foot off the pedal right now. Should blow Boston College out pretty comfortably. SMU or pass. Next game. Virginia on the road at Notre Dame. The Irish are laying, looks like mostly 23.5. Total sitting at 50.5. Not going to spend a ton of time on this one. Obviously, this is a mismatch. Notre Dame also seems to be on some kind of rampage right now. According to FEI ratings, Notre Dame's offense 17th. The defense is 3rd. Virginia is 60th and 88th. So, I mean, you could see one side of the graphic is very green and the other one is not very green. So, yeah, you can see why the line's 23.5 here. Virginia is an offense that wants to throw the ball with Calandria. Problem is Calandria going to have any time to throw? I mean, Notre Dame's 20th in press rate, 2nd in sack rate, 33rd in pass rush grade against a Virginia offensive line that's really struggled in pass protection. 102nd in pressure, 106th in sack rate allowed. Not that Calandria's been terrible handling pressure. He's actually been okay. But this Notre Dame pass rush, I mean, it's probably just going to be too much for him here. Not to mention, Virginia racked up some really nice passing numbers in the first few games of the year. Since week 3, the numbers just don't look that great. 233.7 passing yards per game, 7.03 yards per attempt, success rate per dropback under 38%. Remember, this is an offense that wants to throw the ball. The passing numbers, that's what this offense is built on, and they just don't look that great in the last 7 games. Matched up against a Notre Dame defense that hasn't really gotten thrown on all year. I mean, Tyler Shuck did make some throws in the Louisville game, but as a whole, they've been really good against the pass. 5.52 yards per pass attempt allowed. Success rate per dropback down at 28.1%. They're allowing less than 149 passing yards per game. So I don't really expect Calandria to have a big game throwing the ball. The Notre Dame pass rush should be all over him in this one. And on the other side of the ball, we got a Notre Dame rushing attack that's, like I said, it's on a rampage right now. On the season, they're averaging over 6 yards per carry. Success rate per rush over 47%. Matched up against a Virginia defensive front that isn't bad, but both times they saw elite rushing attacks, or elite offenses, I should say, they got run on. In the Louisville and Clemson games, they allowed 5.47 yards per carry, 52% success rate per rush, 186 rushing yards per game. Doesn't give me a ton of faith in the Virginia defensive front holding this Notre Dame run game down. Now, as far as betting this game, personally, I do think 23.5 is a bit much. We saw this Virginia team backdoor cover against Clemson, but the way Notre Dame's going to come out, they're going to hand the ball off between the tackles, and there's not a damn thing Virginia can do to stop it. I'd probably lean towards Notre Dame first half in this one. Protect yourself against Calandria, making throws against Notre Dame's second unit. I don't even know if that could happen, though, because Notre Dame seems to be on a mission. They're killing teams right now. So I'd go Notre Dame first half. Probably stay off the full game. There's a very slim chance I bet this one. Next game. LSU is on the road down in the swamp. Florida catching 3.5 or 4 points at home here. Total sitting at 55.5 or 56, depending on your sports book. Let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some head-to-head history. Florida has been struggling with this LSU team. LSU is a perfect 5-0. Straight up in their last 5 matchups, 4-0-1. 4-0-1 against the spread. You got to go back to 2018 to find the last time Florida beat LSU or covered the number. LSU 9-2 straight up in their last 11 meetings. They're 7-3-1 against the spread in their last 11 meetings. So yeah, safe to say Florida has struggled with this LSU team. So will that continue? Will LSU take a 6th straight game against Florida? Well, we know this is an offense that wants to throw the ball with Nussmeier, right? They're 5th in passing frequency, one of the most dynamic passing attacks in the country. They're 38th in yards per pass attempt, 19th in success rate per dropback, 3rd in effective pass, matched up against a Florida defense that's been struggling to defend the pass. 103rd in yards per pass attempt allowed, 73rd in success rate per dropback, 69th in effective pass. So far looking like a favorable matchup for LSU through the air. I know the LSU passing attack hasn't looked quite as crisp in their last few games, just 6.78 yards per attempt, 39.4% success rate per dropback is not great, but look at the opponents. Alabama, Texas A&M, at Arkansas, whose defensive front has been surprisingly good, and Ole Miss. I mean, they've been through the gauntlet in terms of opponents. This game against Florida is actually a breath of fresh air for this LSU passing attack. Finally, a secondary they can make some plays on. We've seen Florida get thrown on pretty heavily in the last 2 games, over 330 passing yards allowed per game, 9.2 yards per attempt, success rate per dropback, 47.2%. Now, they were playing solid defense against the pass in the previous 4 games. You can see the numbers look way better on the right side of the screen. The opponents, Mississippi State, UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky. So not terrible competition or anything, but we're talking about LSU's passing attack here, which more closely resembles Georgia and Texas than it does the teams on the right. So we've seen Florida struggle to defend Georgia through the air and Texas through the air. We should see the same thing here against Nussmeier and the LSU passing attack. The way to get Nussmeier off his groove is to pressure him. You can see dip in production here when he experiences pressure. QB rating drops to a D. Yards per attempt drops to a D+. Here's the problem with that. LSU has an elite pass protection, and Florida's pass rush hasn't been all that great. 62nd in pressure rate, 48th in sack rate. Now, if you are looking to back this Florida team or back this Florida defense, you can point at the fact that LSU has not been able to run the ball in their SEC games. 3.63 yards per carry, just 38% success rate per rush. Florida's run defense has actually been okay. So you can point at the fact that LSU probably won't be able to run the ball in this game. You could also point at the fact that Florida runs a lot of zone coverage, and LSU's passing numbers much more efficient against man. They've actually struggled at times against zone coverage. So there's something. Personally, I think we're looking at Garrett Nussmeier with time in the pocket against the easiest secondary he's seen in weeks. So I like the matchup for LSU offensively as long as the weather's good. That's another thing. Last week against Alabama, the weather was shitty. I had LSU, probably should have taken the weather into consideration a bit more than I did. So if the weather's nice here against this Florida secondary, Nussmeier should have no problem getting the ball down the field and scoring points in this game. But what about on the other side of the ball? What do we think of this matchup for the Florida offense? Well, looking at this graphic here, this doesn't tell us much. These 2 units look pretty evenly matched. Now, if you take a bit of a closer look, you might see that LSU's been struggling to defend the run. In their last 2 games, they're allowing 276.5 rushing yards per game, 5.7 yards per carry, in comparison to their defense against the pass, which has been very good. And then you look at Florida's recent rushing numbers, not anything special. 4.16 yards per carry, 46.2% success rate per rush. That's actually pretty solid. But you might look at this and say, hey, Florida can't really run the ball. LSU's been great against the pass. This might be a good matchup for LSU's defense. Here's the problem with that. It looks like DJ Lagway is going to be playing quarterback in this game. Now, in terms of throwing the ball, that doesn't scare me off LSU's defense. They've been solid against the pass, and I'm not worried about DJ Lagway's arm. But did you see what Jalen Milroe did to LSU last week? 12 carries, 185 yards on the ground. That's 15.4 yards per carry, by the way. 4 rushing touchdowns. DJ Lagway is an athlete. So although on paper it looks like a pretty decent matchup for LSU's defense, you throw DJ Lagway in there and it makes things a lot more confusing. I mean, they had no answer to Milroe's athleticism in that Alabama game. DJ Lagway's a great athlete. It makes it really tough to lay more than a field goal on the road here. I mean, that's not going to scare me off the LSU side. It might scare me off laying the points. I would go LSU team total over or grab one of those 3.5s. I haven't bet this game yet. That's where I'm looking. LSU team total over or LSU minus 3.5 next game. Nebraska is out on the West Coast to play USC. Trojans laying 7 and a hook here at home. Total sitting at 50.5. Actually, pretty much 51.5. So let's get into this matchup. We'll start with the Nebraska offense, which has fallen off a cliff against the USC defense. Nebraska offensively 113th in yards per play, 74th in success rate. The passing attack looks so good there for the first handful of games, but they're back at 94th in yards per pass attempt, 67th in success rate per dropback. Matched up against a USC defense that's been pretty good this year. Definitely a huge step forward from the USC defense we saw last year. Here are Raiola's numbers on the year. I mean, they don't look terrible. 1,900 yards, 7 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Keep in mind, he is a freshman, but considering after 5 games, his numbers look pretty damn good. To look at them now, no question, there's just been a drop-off. I mentioned the Nebraska offense had fallen off a cliff. Well, here you go. In their last 4 games, they're averaging 14.5 points per game. 14.5. 4.1 yards per play is terrible. Success rate down below 37%. And okay, they played Indiana and Ohio State, but Rutgers, it's one of the worst defenses in the conference. And UCLA's defense hasn't been very good either. So for whatever reason, Matt Rule's offense just is not working right now. Look at the drop-off in passing production. Through the first 5 games, over 258 passing yards per game, 8.56 yards per attempt. Success rate per dropback almost at 50%. They've fallen off a cliff. In the last 4 games, the success rate per dropback is down below 32%, 5.43 yards per pass attempt. Up against a USC defense that's been playing the pass well. In their last 3 games, they're allowing just 6.87 yards per attempt, 42.9% success rate per dropback, and there's 2 road games in there in the last 3. At Washington, we know that passing attack is pretty good, and at Maryland, Billy Edwards Jr. can throw the ball, so it's not like they haven't played passing attacks. This USC defense, like I said, way better than last year's defense. Also, USC runs a lot of man coverage. 56 in man coverage frequency. Nebraska's been terrible trying to throw the ball on man coverage so far this year. So I don't see this as the spot where Dylan Raiola's cold stretch ends. I mean, he should continue to struggle. This offense should continue to struggle. And if you're thinking Nebraska's going to run the ball in this game, I mean, in the last 4 games, they're averaging 2.82 yards per carry as a team. Just over 100 rushing yards per game. So the rushing attack hasn't been there either for Nebraska. And USC's defense has been excellent against the run. In their last 4 games, they're allowing just 3.32 yards per carry. So I don't expect the run to be there either. This should be a struggle for Nebraska's offense in this one. But what about on the other side of the ball? Because we got a new quarterback here at USC, and we look at these numbers, 19th in yards per play, 16th in success rate, efficient rushing numbers, solid-looking passing numbers. But if you followed USC football this year, you know that this offense is kind of trending in the wrong direction. Like I said, Miller Moss just got benched. And Nebraska defensively, the offense has fallen off, but I still believe in this Nebraska defense. They're 35th in yards per play, 64th in success rate, solid numbers against the run, which is huge because that's what's been working for USC. They've been running the ball recently. Nebraska's 14th in yards per carry allowed, 57th in success rate per rush, 26th in effective rush. We know Lincoln Riley likes to throw the ball, and on the season, USC is 4th in passing frequency. But like I said, they've been running the ball as of late, and Miller Moss has been, Andy literally put the word benched on the graphic. I'm just seeing that. So Miller, benched. All right, so Miller Moss has been benched. The quarterback starting in Miller Moss's spot is Mayava, the kid from UNLV last year. He was pretty good on UNLV last year. That's his numbers on the season. Over 3,000 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, passer rating over 147. I think we can all agree that throwing the ball on Big Ten defenses is slightly different than throwing the ball on Mountain West defenses, though. So I really doubt those numbers would have translated over to the Big Ten. Now, you can point at the fact that Nebraska's secondary has been getting thrown on. In their last 3 games, they're allowing over 10.6 yards per pass attempt, 58.3% success rate per dropback. So they've been struggling against the pass in their last few games. But look at the opponents. Indiana, Ohio State, UCLA. Indiana and Ohio State, probably the 2 most explosive offenses in the conference next to Oregon. And UCLA's red hot with Ethan Garber. So they played 3 explosive offenses in a row. USC with a new quarterback and a struggling passing attack, a passing attack that's trending downwards. That's not the same thing. And I know out on the West Coast, that's a situation. We've seen Big Ten teams struggle with this coast-to-coast travel, but defense travels more than offense. So I actually trust the Nebraska defense to bounce back here and keep Mayava from going off through the air. It also helps that Nebraska should be able to generate pressure in this game. The pass rush has been good this year. 17th in pressure rate, 26th in sack rate, 21st in pass rush grade. This is a top 25 pass rush. It's probably the best aspect of their defense. USC in pass protection, not great. 89th in pressure rate allowed, 20th in sack rate. So they've avoided taking sacks, but 114th in pass blocking grade. So the pass rush should be there for Nebraska. Like I said, I don't really trust Mayava to have a big game throwing the ball against this pass rush, against this defense. The question's going to be right here. Does this continue? In their last 2 games, USC's been running it. 5.79 yards per carry, over 55% success rate per rush. Here's the issue with that. I trust the Nebraska defensive front 7. I know in the last 3 games, we've seen the run defense numbers fall off a bit. 140 yards per game, 4.52 yards per carry, 42% success rate per rush. But again, they've played Ohio State, Indiana, and UCLA, whose offense is red hot now. So I think against a USC offense that's definitely, based on the way they're playing right now, a step down from those other three. I think this is a get-right spot for the Nebraska defensive front. I don't know if USC's success on the ground continues here. Like I said, I like this Nebraska defensive front. They're a solid run defense. It's a good pass rush. I think the Huskers are able to give USC's offense all kinds of problems with a new quarterback here, which is why there's no way I can lay more than a touchdown. I wouldn't even lay 6 here with USC. I lean towards the Nebraska side. I haven't placed a bet in this game yet, but I'm leaning towards Nebraska plus 7.5. The reason I haven't placed that, little bit worried that Nebraska is not going to be able to score points. I don't trust Nebraska's offense at all. So what about an under at 51.5? I think the total's suspiciously high, so I would go under here, 51.5. And as I'm recording this, I'm realizing I should probably place this bet. Yeah, under 51.5. I haven't placed this yet, but I'll probably place it right after I'm done recording. Give me the under. Next game. Baylor is on the road in Morgantown, where they have not had much success. They're laying, though. They're road favorites here. West Virginia catching 1.5. Total sitting at 59.5. We'll start with some head-to-head history. And as I just said, Baylor has struggled in Morgantown. 0-5 in their trips here. They have never won. They have never once won a football game in Morgantown. So they're hoping to snap that. So let's get into the matchup. We'll start with the Baylor offense, which has been very good with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. 25th in yards per play, 45th in success rate. This is an offense that wants to run the ball first. You can see their rushing numbers, 17th in yards per carry, but they're also more than capable of throwing it. 46 in yards per pass attempt, 40th in success rate per dropback. West Virginia's defense is extremely one-dimensional in a sense that they play excellent defense against the run. 34th in the country in yards per carry allowed, 25th in success rate per rush, 12th in effective rush. So this is a very good defensive front. The problem is the secondary has had their problems. 132nd in yards per pass attempt allowed, 120th in success rate per dropback, 121st in effective pass. And when you look at Sawyer Robertson's numbers on the year, you might think he's going to cook on this West Virginia secondary. I mean, 7.8 yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. But the thing is, if you look at the last 3 games, Baylor's won 3 in a row. You can see that despite the passing numbers being very good, I mean, 246 passing yards per game, 8.9 yards per attempt, 50.1% success rate per dropback, you can see that this is still an offense that wants to run the ball. Over 285 rushing yards per game, 53.8% success rate per rush, 7.52 yards per carry as a team. So even though the Baylor passing attack has been efficient, this is still a run-first offense, and now they're on the road in Morgantown where they may not be able to run it like that. In their last 5 games, West Virginia's allowing just 3.31 yards per carry as a team, 36.8% success rate per rush. Like we just said before, the way to beat this West Virginia defense is to throw on them. 9.3 yards per attempt, 48% success rate per dropback on the season. That's how you score points on this West Virginia defense. You throw the ball. And you might be thinking, well, Kyle, who cares? Sawyer Robertson will just throw the ball. We know he can. And that's true, but it's a lot easier to throw the ball when you're getting run support. We just looked at Baylor's offensive numbers in the last 3 games, the 3 wins in a row they've had, 7.5 yards per carry as a team. Sawyer Robertson's production looked a lot different in the 3 games before that when Baylor wasn't really able to run the ball. Playing the quarterback position is a lot easier when you have run support. On the road, West Virginia is able to take the run away or at least limit it. Sawyer Robertson put in a position where he's forcing throws he doesn't want to make. I think he's going to throw a pick or 2 in this game. I know West Virginia's pass defense is terrible. The secondary's been bad. I think Sawyer Robertson's going to give us 1 or 2 interceptions in this one. But obviously, Baylor's going to be able to score points in this game. This is a good offense. West Virginia's defense is not good. So Baylor's going to score points. But I think Sawyer Robertson, I think we can count on him to give us a costly interception in this one. But let's take a look at the matchup on the other side. This is where it gets interesting because you look at the West Virginia offense, and this is a run-first unit. They're 19th in rushing frequency on the year. But the thing is, they've looked a little bit different since the quarterback change. You bring up these numbers here, and you look at Baylor's numbers against the run, 34th in yards per carry, 6th in success rate per rush. So you might think, West Virginia's screwed. Baylor's got a strong run defense, and this West Virginia offense wants to run the ball. But like I said, since this kid Nico took over at quarterback, West Virginia has more of a passing attack. He's got an A+ big-time throw rate. This kid makes big throws, 7.9 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions so far. Look at the 2 games he started. Look at the passing numbers. 9.7 yards per attempt, success rate per dropback over 42%. Actually, the passing attack with Nico at quarterback has been more efficient than the rushing attack. So you look at Baylor's numbers against the run in the last 3 games, just 3.25 yards per carry allowed, 38% success rate per rush, and you might think, they can shut this West Virginia offense down. This is an offense that wants to run the ball. Well, now West Virginia seems to have more of a passing attack. By the way, Garrett Green, he's cleared to come back. I think he lost his job. We're still going to see Nico because he's been throwing the ball a lot more efficiently than Garrett Green was. Look at Baylor's numbers against the pass in their last 4 games. They're allowing over 320 passing yards per game. Success rate per dropback at 50.6%, 8.85 yards per pass attempt. So I think this kid Nico can throw the ball in this game. And in my opinion, Baylor shouldn't be laying on the road. This should be West Virginia -1 in Morgantown, a place where Baylor has never won. I'm on the Mountaineers here. Money line. I like Nico. West Virginia money line. Next game. Mizzou on the road at South Carolina. The Gamecocks are laying 2 touchdowns in this one. South Carolina -14. Total sitting at 41.5. Let's get into it, and we'll start with some head-to-head history. Been a while since South Carolina got the win here. 2018 was the last time South Carolina beat Missouri. They've won. Mizzou has won 5 straight up, and against the spread. So it's been a while since South Carolina beat this team, but they're laying 2 touchdowns, so certainly that should come to an end here. As far as the matchup on the field, I mean, this is going to be a situation for Missouri's offense. Not only has the offense been pretty bad all year, 89th in yards per play, 73rd in success rate. They've had no passing attack. I mean, the run game was decent early in the year, but even that's been unreliable. But Brady Cook is still out. He's listed as doubtful for this game, which means obviously he's most likely not playing. And since Brady Cook went down with an injury, this Missouri offense has been god-awful. In the last 2 games without Brady Cook, they're averaging 15 points per game, success rate at 35.3%, 3.8 yards per play is so bad. They've had no passing presence whatsoever, under 108 passing yards per game, 4.15 yards per pass attempt, 27.1% success rate per dropback. So this Missouri offense, not only was it already struggling before Brady Cook got hurt, but since he went down, it's been next level bad. One of the worst offenses in the SEC. In fact, it might be the worst offense in the SEC. And they're on the road against a South Carolina defense that's been good as hell. In their last 3 games, they're allowing 12 points per game. Success rate under 38%, 4.41 yards per play. Nobody's been throwing the ball in South Carolina. Just 6.17 yards per attempt allowed in their last 3 games. Look at the pass rush. Arguably the best pass rush in the entire country. 9th in pressure rate, 7th in sack rate, 1st in pass rush grade. So I don't expect Missouri's offense to do anything here. In Missouri's last 2 road SEC games, they were held to 0 and 10 points. And I think that's pretty on par with what we can expect here. I mean, I'm not going to say Missouri's going to be held to 3 points or anything crazy, but should be a really, really tough game. But then we flip it over to the other side, and this is where you can find some value on Mizzou. I mean, as bad as the offense has been, the defense has held up their end. I mean, they're 51st in yards per play, 19th in success rate. They've been pretty decent against the run, pretty solid against the pass. Missouri's defense has not let them down. It's the offense that didn't show up this year. And South Carolina offensively, they have looked good in their last couple games, but as a whole, this hasn't been a very good offense this year. They're 80th in yards per play, 90th in success rate, 79th in yards per carry, 79th in success rate per rush. They are 24th in yards per pass attempt. They've connected on a lot of big plays through the air, but it's not consistent. Just 103rd in success rate per dropback. This Missouri defensive line has been good as hell this year. They're 16th in line yards, so teams aren't able to generate push in the run game against Mizzou. Also, they've got a pass rush. 43rd in pressure rate, 12th in sack rate. Look at Lenore Sellers' numbers when pressured. Huge drop-off in production. So they're most likely able to disrupt this South Carolina passing attack because, as we know, dating back to last year with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, pass protection's been an issue for this South Carolina offensive line. So I think Mizzou's defensive front poses all kinds of problems for this South Carolina offensive line. Now, we do have to give South Carolina credit. The offense has looked pretty good in the last couple of games. I mean, they've been running the ball, they've been throwing the ball, averaging 36 points per game, but it was really just a Texas A&M game where they went off. Last week against Vanderbilt, I mean, they scored 28 points in the game, but it wasn't an offensive explosion. I had South Carolina team total under 26.5 in that one, which obviously lost, but I watched a lot of that game, and I felt like it was the correct bet. The South Carolina offense wasn't consistently moving the ball. So in my opinion, this is a sell high spot on a South Carolina offense that I don't think is nearly as good as the numbers from the last 2 games are showing. And keep in mind, this Mizzou defense, like we said, it's been good. In the last 3 games, they're holding opponents to 24.7 points per game, 39.5% success rate, 5.44 yards per play. The only 2 teams that have been able to run the ball in Missouri all season is Texas A&M and Alabama. They got ran all over in those 2 games, but look at their numbers against everyone else. Under 100 rushing yards allowed per game, 35% success rate per rush, 3 yards per carry. So I trust this run defense. I trust this pass rush. I like this Missouri defense. In my opinion, the South Carolina offense is not consistent enough to lay 2 full touchdowns. Now, does that mean I have the balls to put my money on Missouri right now? No, absolutely not. But it would only be Mizzou plus 14 for me in this one. I thought about taking an under, but last week I got cooked on South Carolina team total under. That went over. And I also took the under in the Missouri-Oklahoma game. The score was 10-9 in the 4th quarter, and they scored like 37 fourth quarter points to go over. So I got cooked taking unders in games with both of these teams last week. So I'm not going to take the under. I guess Missouri plus 14 or pass, but probably just going to stay off this game next. All right, like I said, we got the Vols on the road in Georgia. As far as the line, I see 10s and 10.5s. So Georgia laying pretty big number here. Could be due to the fact that Nico might not play, and we'll talk about that in a second. Total sitting at 48.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in on the Georgia side. About 60% of the tickets, about 75% of the money. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some head-to-head history. This has been a very one-sided rivalry. Georgia is 7-0 in their last 7. They've won 7 in a row against Tennessee. They're also 7-1 against the number in their last 8. So in the Georgia-Tennessee rivalry, if you've been taking Georgia blindly, you are up considerably here. I took Tennessee last year. I took the plus. I think I got it at like plus 9.5 last year. Didn't work out for me. Wasn't even close. So yeah, Georgia has owned Tennessee in recent years. So will that change this year? Well, we're looking at kind of 2 opposite offenses here. Tennessee, we know they got Nico, the superstar freshman quarterback, but actually this is an offense that wants to run the ball. They're 9th in rushing frequency so far this year. Georgia's 19th in passing frequency. So we got a heavy run-first offense against a heavy pass-first offense. Running the ball in Georgia might be a bit of a challenge. Look at Georgia's numbers against the run here. 16th in yards per carry allowed, 11th in success rate per rush, 4th in effective rush. Keep in mind, like I said earlier, Nico might not play in this game. He's in concussion protocol. I have no idea. I think it's a true toss-up. So Tennessee might be even more reliant on the run than they normally are. 33rd in yards per carry, 57th in success rate per rush, 31st in effective rush. Against this Georgia run defense, it's not exactly a great matchup. And it sucks that Nico gets hurt now before the Georgia game because he just seemed to be getting it together. In the last 2 games, 252 passing yards per game, 52.5% success rate per dropback, 8.9 yards per attempt compared to the previous 4 where they were really struggling to throw the ball. So Nico just seemed to be getting it together. Gets hurt, concussion protocol right before the biggest game of the year on the road at Georgia. And this is a Georgia pass defense that has shown us they're vulnerable. I mean, Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, they went off against Georgia. 263 yards through the air, 9.4 yards per attempt, success rate per dropback over 55%, and that was in shitty weather. They had no problems making throws against this Georgia defense. We also saw Jalen Milroe making throws in this Georgia defense. They put up like 45 points or whatever in that game. So as far as Georgia defending the pass, I'm not scared to fade that, but they have been really tough against the run. And if Nico's not playing, Tennessee's going to be really reliant on the run. And I just can't get there. Now, if Nico is going to play, I probably could get there, having some faith in this Tennessee offense. Okay, maybe they'll struggle to run the ball, but this is not the same Georgia pass rush that we've seen in years past. I believe their main guy was injured for a little bit this year, but still, I mean, 65th in pressure rate, 73rd in sack rate. This is not the same Georgia elite pass rush. Tennessee's offensive line has struggled a little bit in pass protection, but against Georgia, they might be able to give Nico some clean pockets to throw from. Nico, when given a clean pocket, has been excellent. A-, B+. So if Nico plays in this game, I think he's able to make throws on this Georgia defense. Unfortunately, I don't know much about the backup. His name is, damn it, I just had a Gaston Moore. That's a 5th-year senior, I think, redshirt senior. Really, he has 42 career pass attempts. Don't really know much about him. But if Nico plays, I do think we can count on Tennessee making some throws. I mean, they're not going to go off on the Georgia defense in Athens, but I think they are able to make some throws. And they're going to have to, because I really don't know how effective the run game is going to be in this one for Tennessee. In their last 6 games, they're averaging just 3.98 yards per carry, 188 rushing yards per game, 42.8% success rate per rush. This is a team that wants to run the ball. They want to get the ball to Sampson, hasn't been overly efficient, and Georgia on the season is allowing less than 3.5 yards per carry. 34.9% success rate per rush. So I don't know how effective the run game is going to be for Tennessee. They need Nico out there because I do think he's able to make some throws. But when we flip it around to the other side of the ball, this is where you can really find some value on Tennessee because that defense has been official all year. I was looking at this. Check this out. So no team has scored 20 points on Tennessee this entire season. Arkansas put up 19, Alabama 17, Kentucky 18, Florida 17. That one went to overtime too. No team has scored 20 points on Tennessee's defense the entire season. They're second in yards per play, second in success rate, elite against the run, elite against the pass, fourth in yards per carry allowed, second in success rate per rush. Georgia, as we know, an offense that wants to throw the ball. Run game hasn't really been there for Georgia. 83rd in yards per carry, 49th in success rate per rush. They've been completely reliant on Carson Beck making throws. 38th in yards per pass attempt, 29th in success rate per drop back. They're going to have their hands full in this one against this Tennessee defense. And Carson Beck has been struggling a little bit. Through their first 6 games, Georgia was averaging 318 passing yards per game. Success rate per dropback almost up at 50%, just about 8.5 yards per pass attempt. In their last 3 games, just 223 passing yards per game, 38.1% success rate per dropback, just 6 yards per pass attempt. Keep in mind, this is an offense that wants to throw the ball. That's their offense lives and dies by Carson Beck throwing the football. And in the last 3 games, they're averaging 6 yards per attempt. Not good. And like I said, this Tennessee defense has basically been as elite as it gets. The only team that was able to throw the ball in Tennessee all year was Arkansas. 297 yards, 9.9 yards per attempt, 53.1% success rate per dropback. But Taylon Green is mobile. Carson Beck is most definitely not mobile. Look at Tennessee's numbers against the pass in every other one of their games. Just 155.9 passing yards allowed per game. Success rate per dropback under 34%, 5.39 yards per pass attempt. So I truly don't trust Carson Beck. Now, the good news for Georgia is the offensive line has done their job in terms of pass protection. Haven't created a ton of space in the run game. Just 103rd in stuff rate, 91st in line yards. But pass protection has been pretty solid. We expected it to be one of, if not the best pass protection in college football this year. They're 26th in pressure rate allowed, 25th in sack rate. But they're definitely going to have their hands full in this one because this Tennessee defensive front, I would put it right up there next to Penn State, Ohio State, the best defensive front in college football. I mean, they're 7th in pressure rate, 47th in sack rate, 10th in line yards, 15th in stuff rate. And we've seen how Carson Beck handles pressure. It is not pretty. F QB rating, F turnover worthy play rate, F yards per pass attempt when pressured. When given a clean pocket, obviously we know he can make some throws, but when pressured, it's been a nightmare for Carson Beck. And yes, Georgia's pass protection is elite, one of the best in the country. But Tennessee's pass rush, that defensive front is not a joke. They're going to be able to pressure Carson Beck. And can we really count on Georgia giving Carson Beck any run support in this game? I mean, in their last 3 games, they're averaging just 3.41 yards per carry. 47% success rate per rush is actually pretty good. But matched up against Tennessee, I mean, I suppose if you're betting Georgia, you can point at the fact that teams were able to run the ball in Tennessee a bit in their last 2 games. But as a whole, I mean, no one's been able to run the ball in Tennessee much this year. Like I keep saying, this defensive front has been about as good as it gets in college football. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, the total seems super high, 48.5 in a Tennessee game. Tennessee hasn't allowed a single team to score 20 points all season. So definitely leaning towards the under. As far as a side, I mean, if Nico plays, I'd probably be down to take a shot with the plus 10.5, but if he's not in there, I don't know enough about the backup quarterback. So give me the under. My pick for this game is the under. If Nico plays, I might throw a few dollars on Tennessee if it's still up at 10. Pretty much anything above 7, I would take a shot on Tennessee if Nico's playing, but under 48.5. I'm out of time. There's a few more night games I wanted to do, but I got to get this video edited and uploaded. So I'm on Kansas. I think Kansas beats BYU. I got a +3. I don't think you can get that anymore. I think it's at 2.5, but I think they win outright. So I like Kansas. Took the under in the Arizona State game, even though I think the market may have moved against me in that one. I think I got 50.5. I'll have to check. But I took the under in that one. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball, and both teams are going to struggle. Clock should be rolling, so I like the under there. We'll talk about it on the live show. Live show, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We'll go through, I think we have 25 games lined up. So if you're able to make it, we'd love to see in the comments. If you want to just go on the website and see all the bets I have open right now, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. It's all listed there. I'll also be posting the final bet report with all of my bets, favorite bets, parlay of the day, and all that. That'll be late tonight, probably around midnight. So if you're interested, head over there and sign up. Let's have ourselves a good Saturday. Please remember to bet responsibly. Talk to you in the Discord.